Welcome back for another episode of our podcast, Going Nowhere. And I had an idea today. Well, an idea. I stumbled across the idea, it's better to say,
Mm.
about this story written on Tumblr on as a response to a writing prompt blog. So the writing prompt in this blog was the temples are built for gods. Knowing this, a farmer builds a small temple to see what kind of god turns up. And I wanted to share this story.
So someone just writes. I don't know sure how these things work. So there's a blog, and people put a writing prompt. So did the author respond to that writing prompt, or did he create the writing prompt?
I think the author of the blog created the writing prompt, and then a random user, I think in this case, because it's not the same name, wrote the response story to that prompt.
Oh, okay.
And I think there is subreddits that are similar to that, where
That's a cool
people
idea.
add writing prompts and then people try their creative writing and they try different things and they
Yeah.
tell stories that they want to tell, I
I
suppose.
guess if you're just lazy and you come up with loads of ideas for
Mm,
stories, then you can just put them on there and just hope someone fleshes them out, and you're like, oh yeah, that's a cool story, and that's sort of what I was thinking, but fleshed out.
precisely. And stay with me. I thought it was a very touching story, and that's why I want to share it with you and our viewers.
Yeah, I'm
So
intrigued. Yeah.
it's not too long, and I thought it's very worth listening to. So I will get right along and start reading the story. So
Mm.
I'll repeat the prompt again. Temples are built for gods. Knowing this, a farmer builds a small temple to see what kind of god turns up. And then the user Sado Euphemist replied, Arepo built a temple in his field. Oh, no, by the way, before I start, I'll make a parenthesis that the story was fleshed out by three different users. And the collection of these three stories is commonly known as the God of Arepo. So I'll just say that for our users in case
So we're
anyone
going to have
knows.
3 parts, and we'll discuss it after each part. And
Yes.
yeah, each part is like 5 minutes,
Mm,
5 10 minutes.
exactly.
Yeah, cool.
Just then I thought to mention the name just in case anyone else knows this story. If they already know it,
Oh
let us
yeah,
know.
yeah.
So to start with, Arepo, Arepo built a temple in his field, a humble thing, some stones stacked up to make a cairn, and 2 days later a god moved in. I hope you're a harvest god, Arepo said, and set up an altar and burned 2 stalks of wheat. It'd be nice, you know. He looked down at the ash smeared on the stone. The rocks all laid askew, and coughed and scratched his head. I know it's not much, he said, his straw hat in his hands, but I'll do what I can. It'd be nice to think there's a god looking after me. The next day, he left a pair of figs. The day after, he spent 10 minutes of his morning seated by the temple in prayer. On the third day, the god spoke up. You should go to the temple in the city, the god said. Its voice was like the rustling of the wheat, like the squeaks of field mice running through the grass. A real temple, a good one. Get some real gods to bless you. I'm no one much myself, but I might be able to put in a good word for you. It plucked a leaf from a tree and sighed. I mean, not to be rude, I like this temple. It's cozy enough. The worship's been nice, but you can't honestly believe any of this is going to bring you anything. This is more than what I was expecting when I built it, Arepo said, laying down his scythe and lowering himself to the ground. Tell me, what sort of god are you anyway? I am of the fallen leaves, it said, the worms that churn beneath the earth, the boundary of the forest and the field, the first hint of frost before the first snow falls, the skin of an apple as it yields beneath your teeth. I am a god of a dozen different things, scraps that lead to rot, momentary glimpses, a change in the air, and then it's gone. The god heaved another sigh. There's no point in worshipping that. Not like war or harvest, or the storm. Save your prayers for the things beyond your control, good farmer. You're so tiny in this world, so vulnerable. Best to pray to a greater thing than me. Arepo plucked a stalk of wheat and flattened it in between his teeth. I like this sort of worship fine, he said. So if you don't mind, I think I'll continue. Do as you will, said the god, and withdrew deeper into the stones. But don't say I never warned you otherwise. Arepo would say a prayer before the morning's work, and he and the god contemplated the trees in silence. Days passed like that, and weeks, and then the storm rolled in, black and bold and blustering. It flooded Arepo's fields, shook the tiles from his roof, smote his olive tree, and set it to cinder. The next day, Arepo and his sons walked among the wheat, salvaging what they could. The little temple had been strewn across the field, and so when the work was done for the day, Arepo gathered the stones and pieced them back together. Useless work, the god whispered, but came creeping back inside the temple regardless. There wasn't a thing I could do to spare you this, said the god. We'll be fine, Arepo said. The storm's blown over. We'll rebuild. Don't have much of an offering for you today, he said, and laid down some ruined wheat. But I think I'll shore up this thing's foundations tomorrow. How about that? The god rattled around in the temple and sighed. A year passed, and then another. The temple had layered walls of stones and a roof of woven twigs. Arepo's neighbors chuckled as they passed it. Some of their children left fruit and flowers, and then the harvest failed. The gods withdrew their bounty. In Arepo's fields, the wheat sprouted thin and brittle. People wailed and tore their robes, slaughtered lambs and spilled their blood, looked upon the ground with haunted eyes, and went to bed hungry. Arepo came and sat by the temple. The flowers wilted now, the fruits shriveled nubs. Arepo's ribs showing through his chest, his hands still shaking, and murmured out a prayer. There is nothing here for you, said the god, huddling in the dark. There is nothing I can do. There is nothing to be done. It shriveled and spat out its words. What is this temple but another burden to you? We, Arepo said. His voice wavered. So it's a lean year, he said. We've gone through this before. We've gone through this again. We'll get through this again. So we're hungry, he said. We've still got each other, don't we? And a lot of people prayed to their gods, but didn't protect them from this. No, he said, and shook his head, and laid down some shriveled weeds on the altar. No, I think I like our arrangement fine. Arepo said, There will come worse, the god said from the hollows of the stone, and there will be nothing I can do to save you. The years passed. Arepo rested a wrinkled hand upon the temple of stone, and some days spent an hour there, lost in contemplation with the god. And one fateful day, from across the wide dark seas, came war. Arepo came stumbling to his temple now, his hand pressed against his gut, anointing the holy site with his blood. Behind him, his wheat fields burned, and the bones burned black in them. He came crawling on his knees to a temple of hewed stone, and the god rushed out to meet him. I could not save them, the god said, its voice a low wail. I am sorry, I am sorry, I am so sorry. The leaves fell burning from the trees, a soft, slow rain of ash. I have done nothing all these years, and I have done nothing for you. Shush, Arepo said, tasting his own blood, his vision blurring. He propped himself up against the temple, forehead pressed against the stone in prayer. Tell me, he mumbled. Tell me again, what sort of god are you? I, said the god, and reached out, cradling Arepo's head, and closed its eyes and spoke. I am of the fallen leaves, it said, and conjured up the image of them, the worms that churn beneath the earth, the boundary of forest and of field, the first hint of frost before the first snow falls, the skin of an apple as it yields beneath your teeth. Arepo's lips parted in a smile. I am a god of a dozen different things, it said. The petals in bloom that lead to rot, the momentary glimpses, a change in the air. Its voice broke and it wept before it's gone. Beautiful, Arepo said, his blood staining the stones, seeping into the earth. All of them. They were all so beautiful. And as the fields burned and the smoke blotted out the sun, as men were trodden in the press and bloody war raged on, as the heavens let loose their wrath upon the earth, Arepo the sower lay down in his humble temple, his head sheltered by the stones, and returned home to his god.
Hmm.
That completes part one of the story.
Right. Okay.
How
Was
do you
it
feel about
was
it?
it supposed to end there, or is it just that someone wanted to add to it, or
I
was it?
don't know if the author was meant to intended to end it there. To be honest, I think even if it ended there, it is a beautiful ending and a beautiful story.
Hmm.
I think. How do you feel about it?
I don't know. I was going to ask you what you feel like. What was the what? Can you explain the ending a bit better?
I would say I wouldn't say it's so much. I think it's about many people think that God and worshiping God has to happen in the big temples in the city that God told Arepo he should go to. These are the big gods that he should be worshiping, and that maybe they are able to help him. But the way that God describes the type of God he is, he kind of tells me another aspect that a lot of people overlook. They think the divine has to be grand, has to be loud, has to be making huge miracles,
Mm.
um, and that the divine has to exist in a kind of a big majestic way. But the divine can exist in all the small little things that Arepo's God talked about.
Right. So he's the god of all these smaller things, which maybe
Yeah, which maybe they are the
make life
greatest things.
worth living. And yeah, I mean, there was a good quote.
Precisely.
I'll try and not butcher the quote, but there was a quote like saying, "Treasure the little things because when you look back over your life, they might well end up being the big ones." So
Precisely. They
yeah.
were the things that were beautiful at the end of Arepo's life when he was recounting the same things with the help of his God in that
Mm.
case.
And
And
they're also
also,
the
yeah,
sorry, they are the things, the little things you overlook when you're so stressed about war or
yeah,
famine, and yeah, your own survival or the survival of other people, which is
mm,
rightly so. You don't want suffering. Suffering is very a fact of life, and so you when you can't control the suffering and you can only do so much,
mm,
then the rest of the time you have to learn to relax so you can take in the uh, small but beautiful things.
And I think it's also this kind of story points out to your relationship with God, or no matter your religion, no matter your creed, no matter where you're from, it's something that is your personal relationship. We've talked about this the other day. It's not a relationship, it's a relationship that you make with your God, no matter who that is.
Mm,
And it's not a transactional relationship. It's not I give you the worship, I give you the temples, I give you gold, I sacrifice things in your name, and then you give me salvation. I think this is a very good emphasis in the story. This is not. I think a lot of people think of religion as transactional. You know, I'll believe in my God and then I'll get rewarded for it.
mm.
Arepo kept believing in his God because he was believing despite his God not being able to help him in the traditional way that we expect God to help us.
Yeah. Um, would you say like his people talk of a leap of faith in terms of religion, and Alex
Mm.
O'Connor, himself a famous atheist, said that he probably thinks there is something to it. But when people do take a leap of faith, they
Mm.
almost do find some sort of divine relationship. So yeah, like obviously, if you're coming from an atheistic point of view, that's sort of interesting. Like, is it that when you take a leap of faith, when you take on your own personal journey of devoting yourself to something like a god or god, then do you almost create a god or god, not
Mm.
or yeah, synthesize
M-
with something that's already there? It's a question I don't have an answer to, but it's interesting.
Maybe when you take the leap of faith, you're like Arepo, making his own shrine for his own god, and you let your god inhabit it, and you build your relationship with your god, and it doesn't matter if bad things happen to you. That's the thing. Bad things happen to everyone, and they will be part of life. But this is not God isn't there to stop these bad things happening, as people tend to think about. I think.
Yeah, and
Um,
um, shrines obviously is interesting because in the UK, generally people go to church once a week, and that's
mm,
like only religious space. Whereas in many cultures, such as
mm,
India and
mm,
also in Christianity, say Greece, of course, they have shrines in lots of different places,
yep.
and it doesn't need to be grand or whatever.
People have
But
little shrines in their homes as well.
yeah,
So
and I guess that's a reminder that yeah, God just isn't just in one church. It's
exactly, I think
brought
this is
on
what we're
everywhere.
saying. People
Mm,
get caught up on the details. God has to be in these big buildings with all the candles on. If the candles aren't on, God isn't there. I don't know. It's
mm.
it's a little bit missing the big picture here for the little things.
Yeah,
Looking
I
at the
guess
little things and missing the big picture.
it's nice where we built such great architecture for in the temples, but also that shouldn't mean that a simple like set of rocks or a small like structure can just be hold God just as much as something else.
Mm, mm.
Mm.
I like that part a lot, and I could have taken it as it is, but I like the other parts as well.
Okay,
I think they
I'm intrigued to
I
see
think
how it
they're both
progresses.
slightly different, but they both kind of emphasize, like
So
reiterate a little bit.
it's a different writer for the next two, is it?
It's a different writer for the next one, and then a different writer for the last part.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
So three different people in total have written this story, but it all kind of comes together very nicely, I thought,
Mm,
because it kind of one follows up from the other. So
okay.
do you want me to go to the next one?
Yeah, sounds
Mm,
good.
right. So Sora found a temple with the bones within it, the roof falling in upon them. Oh, poor God, she said, with no one to bury your last priest. Then she paused, because she was from far away, and she thought, or is this how the dead are honored here? The god aroused from his contemplation and said, his name was Arepo, and he was a sower. Sora, startled a little, because he had never before heard the voice of God. How can how can I honor him? She asked. Bury him, the god said, beneath my altar. All right, Sora said, and went to fetch a shovel. Wait, said God, when she got back and began collecting the bones from among the broken twigs and fallen leaves. She laid them out on a roll of undyed wool, the only cloth she had. Wait, the god said, I cannot do anything for you. I am not a god of anything useful. Sora sat back on her heels and looked at the altar to listen to the god. When the storm came and destroyed his wheat, I could not save it, the god said. When the harvest failed and he was hungry, I could not feed him. When war came, the god's voice faltered. When God came, I could not protect him. He came bleeding from the battle to die in my arms. Sora looked again at the bones. I think you are the god of something very useful, she said. What? The god asked. Sora carefully lifted the skull onto the cloth. You're the god of Arepo. And that's when part two ends.
Oh, that's really sure.
Very short. But as I said, the other parts are a bit shorter. The next part is a little bit longer.
Mm.
Um, and that's when the part two ends of the story.
So
And
Sora that's a new character.
it's a new character that stumbles in theory, from what I interpret, many years in the future, when the temple is still in ruins. No one has visited again. No one has come across it. It's still not long after the death of Arepo, I suppose, in this case. And and you see that she doesn't know the customs, I suppose, but she still wants to honor Arepo for his, I suppose, sacrifice, but maybe not sacrifice, but for his dedication and commitment to his
Mm.
god, and also um, to honor him, maybe even as a human being, doing something selfishly without needing any reward from Arepo's god in this case. So I think it kind of, in the second part, I suppose the writer liked to kind of show kind of the aftermath, the not long aftermath of what happened and what happened to the temple, I suppose. Um, but despite not having any kind of reward for Sora, Sora is driven by her own morality, I suppose, to kind of do something good for Arepo, to honor him even in death.
Mm.
Um, and I suppose that sets the stage for the last part of the story later on. So
Do you think this relates at all to in many cultures worship their ancestors? We say worship. Maybe that's not quite the right word, but
honoring.
honoring. Yeah,
Mm,
like even in the West, we
mm,
honor our ancestors in some way or other. Usually, and it does seem important to the human condition to want to honor
mm,
humans, and even they found in other species of human, so really far back, but there seems to be some sort of burial rituals that go
mm.
on. So it perhaps is really ancient as a
Something that is really ingrained in us, something
yeah.
that we really want to do for the people we've lost. And you know, even though it's a lot of effort, obviously, in this case, he had to pick up all the bones, get the shovel, put everything together, and bury the bones of Arepo. She wanted to do it, and to honor both of them, I suppose, both Arepo and the god who was still residing in the temple long before
Yeah.
Arepo was long gone. And yeah, I think that's a good part as well. Good expansion to the story, I thought. Um, so we go to the last part.
Mm.
So generations passed now. The village recovered from its tragedies. Homes rebuilt, gardens replanted, wounds healed. The old man who once lived on the hill and spoke to stone and rubble had long since been forgotten, but the temple stood in his name. Most believed it to be empty, as the god who resided there long ago had fallen silent. Yet any who passed the decaying shrine felt an ache in their hearts, as though mourning for a lost friend. The cold that seeped from the temple entrance laid their spirits low, and warded off any potential visitors, save for the rare and especially oblivious children who would leave tiny clusters of pink and white flowers that they picked from the surrounding meadow. The god sat in his peaceful home, staring out at the distant road, to pedestrians, workhorses, and carriages, raining leaves that swirled around bustling feet. How long had it been? The world had progressed without him, for he knew there was no help to be given. The world must be a cruel place, that even the useful gods have abandoned. If farms can flood, harvest can run barren, and homes can burn, he thought. He had come to understand that humans are senseless creatures who would pray to a god that cannot grant wishes or bless upon them good fortune, who would maintain a temple and bring offerings with nothing in return, who would share their company and meditate with such a fruitless deity, who would bury a stranger without the hope for profit. What bizarre, futile kindness they had wasted on him. What wonderful, foolish, virtuous, hopeless creatures humans were. So he painted the sunset with yellow leaves, enticed the worms to dance in the soil, flourished the boundary between forest and field with blossoms and berries, christened the air with a biting cold before winter came, ripened the apples with crisp red freckles to break under sinking teeth, and a dozen other nothings in memory of the man who once praised the god's work on his dying breath. Hello, god of every humble beauty in the world, called a familiar voice. The squinting corners of God's eyes wept down onto curled lips. Arepo, he whispered, for his voice was hoarse from his 100-year mutism. I am the God of devotion, of small kindness, of unbreakable bonds. I am the God of selfless, unconditional love, of everlasting friendships and trust. Arepo avowed, soothing the other with every word. That's wonderful, Arepo, he responded between tears. I'm so happy for you. Such a powerful figure will certainly need a grand temple. Will you leave to the city to gather more worshippers? You'll be adored by all. No, Arepo smiled. Further than that, to the capital then, said the god. Thank you for visiting here before your departure. No, I will not go there either. Arepo shook his head and chuckled. Further still? What ambitious goals you must have. There's no doubt in my mind that you will succeed, though, the elder god continued. Actually, interrupted Arepo, I'd like to stay here if you'll have me. The other god was struck speechless. Why would you want to live here? I am the god of unbreakable bonds and everlasting friendships, and you are the god of Arepo. And that continues the full story.
Oh. No.
What do you think of the last part?
Yeah, it was quite touching. I'm not quite sure what to make of it, but yeah, I guess yeah, it's yeah, it gets across the idea of love being not something grand, but yeah, just going back to the small things and devotion to those and yeah, the idea that God, whatever, might be so grand, but also can form a relationship with individuals who are not, or maybe not, don't see themselves as grand.
I wonder if there's like an assumption that from the part two of the story, Sora kind of spread the rumor of the humble priest who dedicated himself to his god with love, compassion to the end, and that kind of faith led to his name being known everywhere and therefore bringing back Arepo with his godlike status, I suppose, as the god of love in this case, as the personification of
Yeah, which has
ultimate
a lot of
love.
parallels to Jesus, and I'm sure
That's what I was thinking a little bit.
yeah.
That's exactly you thought of that. Um, that's what I was gonna say as well. That he kind of thought I thought it was a little bit Jesus like the end of it with like being God as well and wanting to stay with the other God and stuff.
Yeah, obviously you could take the link too seriously with Christianity, but it might be interesting to play with it and yeah, like how Christians almost you they see the Trinity, most
Mm.
Christians, and yeah,
Yeah, if you could think, yeah,
the
go
fact
on.
of God being man is sort of somehow important.
Mm.
God being a man, and maybe yeah, this is a good analogy with
Analogy.
the story because it's Aleppo in a way has a divine role. Even as a humble man, he's can do great things from just his simple devotion and humble devotion.
Mm.
And yeah, like, and especially in Luke's gospel, probably one of the dominant themes is of Jesus as a man showing the way for other people through just humble devotion to um, his God, which he had a personal relationship to.
Yeah.
So he called God, I believe, Abba, which yeah, so father and parent. So and he encouraged his disciples to pray the same way. Is that very personal relationship with deity?
Mm. Yeah.
But then
I thought. Go
the
on.
only difference might be is certainly in modern Christianity is we see God as this one big thing,
Mm.
this like almighty ruler, like war god, like Zeus, effectively, or yeah, and also the God who provides our food as well, I guess, as well. So
Mm.
one big powerful God that we need to please, rather than there being lots of maybe a more animistic view where God is sort of all pervasive, although obviously the theologians in Christianity have the idea of God is omnipresent, but
Mm.
yeah, so it's an interesting yeah link between Christianity and the story for sure.
Mm. I definitely think that it emphasizes that point of kind of challenging the idea that gods are this kind of sacred thing higher, somewhere up in the clouds, and it's more something that is here among
Mm.
us.
Well,
More
the
like,
God up in the clouds is in a way just an extension of our own egos,
yeah.
which actually can cause even more problems. Where religion is supposed to dampen the ego, but yeah, if you yeah, in a way you extend that bit up into the sky and you extend part of yourself out of you, and you then start getting guilty about things.
Mm.
So you think rather than your brain telling you, oh, you should or should not do that, it's actually yeah, you think of it as a god doing it, and actually it probably was society telling you these things are good or bad. You internalize it, and then you project it back up to a deity character, God on a throne in the clouds, which a lot of Christians will say, I don't believe that, but
I think a lot of people do
I
in
think on
some
some
ways.
level, that image is very hard to yeah get rid of completely. Obviously, probably a lot of people won't see it literally as that, but to see God as like an abstracted father figure and with the connotations that many people have with their parents because of
Mm.
bad relationships with their parents, even with your good parents, they no one's perfect, and so we if by viewing God through the lens of your relationship with your parents, that
Mm.
can be problematic. Obviously, we just said earlier that Jesus encouraged that personal relationship with God as a parent, because so it can go both ways. It can be a positive and a negative.
Mm. Yeah. I, I think, as you said, I think that kind of projecting God, projecting the grandiose into God, it's kind of taking away a little bit from people noticing how amazing life is, how every detail of life can be amazing when you stop and look at it. In some ways, I suppose, when kind
That's where
of.
you find a more true
Mm.
divinity. Let's rephrase that. So not true necessarily and factually verifiable, but you can sort of feel some sort
Mm.
of something sacredness, some sort of value to that. So we're like Owen Barfield talked about in the modern world, we've lost touch with value. We don't think there is anything of real value
Mm.
except the quantity. So he says we lost touch with quality, and the only real quality we think is quantity, and therefore we accumulate loads. But actually, accumulating lots of things which are worthless still does not.
Hmm.
increase worth, like lots of £0 notes. If we're going a money example, I know it aren't £0 notes, but lots of that does not equal any more worth. So yeah,
It's
to
not
reach
certainly
that
not
point,
spiritual worth.
yeah, yeah, and so yeah, and people like Emerson and Thoreau found God in nature plus the just being solitary in nature, and
Hmm.
I guess then you recognize the little things that just naturally happen, the transitions, life itself. And that's not necessarily to say God is nature, um, but it's, yeah, like it used to be the case, and some people, many people still believe it, but in Christianity, it used to be the case that the nature was the revelation of God,
Hmm.
and in a way, yeah, like it's a Bible, but in the natural form. So people think God created the Bible. God also created and speaks through creation, is the argument, but many people have lost touch with that.
Hmm. Yeah, I do agree. I think even on a personal level, I'm not like a believer in nature being God, but I do think it's, when you go to a place of great natural beauty and you stand there, almost all of us are in awe when we're in a place of natural beauty, where
Hmm.
there's rivers, plants, trees, insects, flies, bees, whatever. Everything is happening, and
Yeah.
you're there. Go
How
on.
much the natural response then is to believe in some sort of sacredness. Obviously, it's very hard to put such a god into words, but to believe in some sort of sacredness. And there's an African proverb which says something along the lines of, "You don't need to point out God to a child."
Because everything is magical to a child, and everything is
Yeah,
uh, God,
and it's that
effectively.
relationship between the childlike mind which interacts with the environment, and in that interrelation some sort of magic happens. And obviously then you could put a story on it, and then the story is not the thing itself.
Mm,
It can be a beautiful story because it reflects something, but yeah, we get caught in stories and dogma and words, and they can be ladders or they can be barriers.
mm. I think this is one of the greatest arguments for in favor of having children. In recent years, people are always talking about the negatives about having
Yeah,
children in this socioeconomic climate, but um, having children allows someone to re-experience the world through the eyes of their children. And I
yeah.
think that is something that cannot be captured as an experience until someone becomes a parent. I think I don't know it, but I think there is something there.
Yeah, and the children are inspiring, and yeah, you can
Yeah.
put it in your way of, they are inspiring. The word spire there being spirit, and so they yeah, remember, so
Mm,
reassemble, member being different parts, so they remember, allow you to remember reality, so to see it as one interconnected reality.
mm, yeah. And I thought the story was also very good in kind of going against the kind of the idea of making religion about the material things, because the shrine was just made by Arepo. It wasn't a big temple, as we were saying earlier. It was just there was no. It wasn't about return on investment. You know what I mean? It's
Yeah.
almost like, the more effort you put in the temples and stuff, the more return you're going to have in your investment. I think in a lot of
Yeah, which a lot of
cultures.
religions try and reiterate, and like the whole thing of Protestantism, a big part of that was the idea that works don't get you to heaven. So it's almost
Mm,
you can't work, and like you can't, you try and do good or whatever. That's not going to help you get into heaven. So you either do or you don't. But that's still, despite I can't say it. Protestantism. That's my heart. Protestantism being, yeah, very prominent. It still, I think many people sort of consciously or subconsciously think they need to work and do lots of good stuff and be a
mm,
really good person to get into heaven, and that actually ends up making people who are perhaps judgmental and unforgiving and not such good people underlying, and so you repress the shallow elements of yourself, which is perhaps the biggest danger of religion.
Hmm. Yeah.
I think,
What did you think, all in all, about the story?
yeah, no, it's a nice little story. It was nice how each author brought something new to it.
I know it's actually that's what kind of struck me the most as well. How three completely separate people, like completely related, probably from different parts of the world, whatever, they came together and they kind of added in a story in a way that it actually made sense as well, and it kind of continued and progressed the story in a different way for its author.
Mm.
And I
Yeah,
think
no,
that
yeah, this sort of
is
like co-authoring. I think that could
yeah.
be really interesting and a really nice career path because it can feel quite daunting and also quite solipsistic to write a book
Mm,
by yourself. And it would be nice almost to have maybe with technologies can allow us to sort of co-create, and you sort of have this team of creators, maybe you know or you don't, and then you sort of see, oh, that was my line, and I can see how that person fleshed that out and built on that. And yeah, I think that would be really cool to see sort of co-authoring, yeah, get a bit more of a get more popularity.
yeah, for me, this story, the God of Arepo, um, kind of resonated with me, but I cannot tell you exactly in what way it resonated with me. Like it's very hard for me to put into words. But
Maybe that's means it really resonated in the right way then.
yeah, it almost I almost felt emotional reading it, if
Mm.
I'm honest with you. But I cannot pinpoint you why, if you asked me on why I felt that. But the funny thing is that reading the comments in like because it was also posted on Reddit, like everyone was touched by the story, and this is what I mean. That's what I wanted to say. That stories seem to resonate with so many of us and in a
Mm.
very similar ways, and that's so magical about stories.
Yeah, well, Yuval Noah Harari would say, yeah, stories are our superpower. Like humans coming up with stories that connects us and allows us to work on great projects and whatever, and co-motivate ourselves. Even it's based on the fantasy. But what I think Yuval Noah Harari doesn't quite get is why stories are resonating with people at all. Like, and why does one story really resonate and one doesn't?
Mm,
There must be
there is something
things,
there.
yeah, and it's things which are psychological slash spiritual, which resonate with people, and you can recognize it. Like, for instance, I'm sure the Disney writers really know what makes a good movie. Well, maybe they don't anymore. I don't know, but that's another debate. But you know, they have got certain features in each movie which are they've sort of learnt make a good story, and those things, I think, if you tie them down, they often come back to essential human values, effectively, like simple stuff, but stuff we often forget about.
Mm, yeah, I do agree. And there were people that were saying they were sobbing in the comments.
Oh, right.
To give you an idea,
Mm.
um, that's how much some people were affected, and it just goes to show how some stories have this kind of power over us that even people are very um like captured by the stories, but at the same time, as me, I suppose, it's hard for them to um verbalize
Mm.
in what ways they were captured so much. Because if you asked me after I read it, I was like, I don't know, it was just a very touching story. If you ask
Mm.
me, even after I read it, I wasn't. It's not any particular thing I can point to and say this really kind of hit me. All of it hit me,
Yeah.
you
Well,
know, in a
that's
way.
the power of stories, but also then stories can be manipulated because they tap into something psychologically slash spiritually real. If, for instance, that story moved enough people that they started to worship Aleppo,
Yeah, Arepo.
or Arepo, sorry, then yeah, that could. But then that's an example of how stories could
Yeah,
go
yeah,
wrong.
yeah.
Yeah. And then
Of
people
course, no. I
doing
mean,
their own remixes of the stories and
I-
extensions and fan fiction.
but in
And
my mind, that would defeat the purpose of the story. That would be an affront to what the story was trying to say. That
mm,
this would be like um, polluting the message of the story in a way. And the story never said about worshiping gods, fictionary gods. It was much more about the human experience, I think, and how kind of um, ties up with our faith, religion, gods, our way of life, our way of living, the way we experience struggle and pain and suffering and all that. And but as Arepo did, we focus on love, compassion, and all the elements of our life that keep us going.
Yeah, I think so many of the people, spiritual teachers from many different areas, they all, it comes through a lot. It's about the how you do something, not the what you do, and yeah, like it's can be very. We think of purpose as something which is we need to do the right thing in terms of we need to pursue that career path over this career path because for whatever reason that's going to help more people, that's going to make me more money, that's going to do whatever. But and we're so much less focused on the how we do it, and in a way, if we can do anything right, if we anything that we have in front of us, we can do in a certain bring a certain virtue to it that we
Mm,
express through that action, and that can almost imbue it with divinity. I think
mm.
Meister Eckhart has a quote which is sort of along those lines. And so we bring the divinity to the thing that we do.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, the way activities can be transformed and divine in that way. So, like, I think in Eastern Europe, probably someplace in Greece, people will always be praying under
Mm,
their often silently, but even when they're doing stuff. So yeah, you're bringing or you're trying to bring that sort of attitude to everything,
mm,
attitude of gratitude, or maybe, um, yeah. And so by through love, through compassion, through peace, then that so there's some sort of value in there, and that's virtue ethics as well. So the ancient Greeks were
mm.
big fans of virtue ethics, and it wasn't
Of
about
course.
what you did; it was about how you did it.
Yeah, I agree. And
And we like to have morality even as something which is dictated in a system. And yeah, so when I was at school, university, studied so many different philosophical systems for morality, and I found none of them were really that convincing. And so virtue
mm,
ethics almost seems to be the best that we've got. And yeah, that's how I think it's also personally more fulfilling as well.
mm, I agree. Uh, as a final note, I think the character of Arepo is a great character to kind of for most of us to aspire to be like. To be honest with you, Arepo never gave up, never um, never blamed his god, never got angry, always pursued to see, always strive to see the positives. As you said, the storm came, we'll rebuild. We didn't have food, food will grow again. There was always a way forward. There was
Yeah,
always,
that's faith, isn't it? That's
yeah,
faith in the
exactly.
pure sense.
And I think,
Not
go on.
faith in terms of praying, please give me all the things I want, or saying, don't give me all the things I don't want. But yeah, just doing what you can, taking, controlling the controllables, and for the uncontrollables, just
Yeah,
acceptance.
exactly. And I thought that was a wonderful message. So I can say that was definitely great. And yeah, I thought that's what I want to share with you and our viewers. And if our viewers liked this story or they were touched by any parts of it, I'd love to hear if anyone has any of their own opinions about this story about the god of Arepo.
Yeah.
And
Also,
let us know in the comments.
any other short stories which would be interesting to
Yeah,
discuss
yeah,
as well. Like I'd be interested in maybe doing this again. Like if I'm sure there's lots of good stories which
I
are
know.
just not long enough to sell a book.
Precisely. I love short stories as well. And if anyone knows any, I'd love to know them and read them and we can go over them in our podcast.
Yeah, perfect.
So yeah. And I think that's it for tonight. And yeah, we'll see you all again next time, I think.
Yeah. See you next time.